Hello, welcome to the Comic Book Commentary. I'm Bo Leidig, and this week we're going to be diving back into the original Angela miniseries with Angela number 2. So let's zoom in and take a closer look. First published in January of 1995, I would like to start off by saying that if you have not seen my video on Angela number 1, you should probably watch that, as this is a self-contained story throughout this miniseries that is one continuous narrative. And if you also haven't watched my video on Spawn number 9, I suggest you watch that as well, because the entire plot of the Angela miniseries is based on the events that took place in Spawn number 9. We can see here on the cover, it's actually not got a whole lot going on. I don't really think this is a terrific cover. We see both Angela and Spawn featured in the middle here with a sword that looks as though it might be something that Angela would carry, though it does have a Spawn symbol in the hilt of the sword. And then, kind of a similar metal design type of pattern going around the image like we saw on the cover of the first issue. And while this image does kind of act as a little bit of a prelude to some story elements within this book, it's still nothing that really jumps out at me. Also, something I thought was odd, you notice here that the background of the cover is an off-white, whereas in the first issue it was like totally white. I'm not sure if that was on purpose or if it's supposed to mean anything, but I thought it was worth pointing out. Story, Neil Gaiman. Pencils, Greg Capullo. Inks, Mark Pennington. Letters, Tom Orzechowski. Color, Steve Oliff and Ollie Optics. We see here on the first page that this story picks up exactly where it left off in the first issue. We see the image of Spawn on the ground in the alleyway with Anahita and Kuan Yin standing above him. They, of course, have just appeared in his alleyway and introduced themselves by kicking him square in the face. He is asking if they are indeed angels. They state they are. He then asks why on earth they hit him, and Kuan Yin states that it's because they found they tend to get people's attention a little bit better once they've knocked them down a few times, and that they're taken more seriously. Spawn then asks what exactly they want, and they state they need him to testify for a friend of theirs who is on trial. Of course, they're talking about Angela, and that his testimony might be the only thing that saves her. He's a little bit reluctant and isn't sure if he can trust them, but before he can ask any more questions, they suddenly blink out of existence on the earthly plane and teleport back to Elysium. Also, I'd like to point out that Spawn asks if they are taking him to heaven, and Kuan Yin says, sort of, kind of-ish, that they're going to Elysium where the angels live. And this sort of questions whether or not Elysium is part of heaven or if it's a separate body. This is where we start to get into more of the unexplained minutia of exactly how the different planes of existence work in the Spawn universe. They are then immediately teleported to Elysium, as we see here on this beautiful 2-page splash. Spawn, of course, is shocked by what he's seeing, wondering how on earth they got there, that didn't feel like teleporting, at least not the way he does it, and then is suddenly stunned to see where he's at and comments about how beautiful it is and how he can't believe the technology, or that all of the women here in Elysium are all drop-dead gorgeous. However, before he can ask any more questions, Kuan Yin yells at him to get inside before anyone notices him, and, essentially it blows their cover. However, I don't see how anyone could have missed Spawn at this point. You'll notice he sticks out like kind of a sore thumb given his color palette compared to the surroundings, and there's no less than like 20 angels depicted in this shot. So it seems impossible that not a single one of them would have noticed him at this point, but apparently we're just going to run with the fact that nobody saw him. Anahita and Kuan Yin then escort Spawn into Angela's suite, as they explain they're allowed to stay there when she's not around. Spawn then also makes the comment, hey, why are you guys all dressed like exotic dancers? To which Anahita doesn't seem to understand the question. This implies that the angels aren't really aware that they're all like gorgeous women. This is just the way that they look, and they just see it as normal. Spawn then states that they don't really seem to be exactly what he expected or thought angels would be or look like. However, before he can keep going, he notices that his costume is starting to make some funny noises and change its shape. He then looks down to realize that his fingers are becoming more elongated and spikes are popping out of his chest and wonders what's happening. Anahita explains that this is because his costume knows that it's in enemy territory and is making itself into a more defensive and appropriate mode for this very circumstance. As we see in the next page, that his costume is starting to create more spikes on itself. We see them coming out of his forearm here. The spikes around his hand are getting longer. He's also gaining more down around his ankle. As he looks through and notices that they've entered a trophy room, Kuan Yin explains that this is because Angela is a hunter and that, she keeps trophies of all her kills, and also tells Spawn that, he shouldn't take it personally that she was trying to kill him earlier, that it was just a contract, and, she's killed tons of other Hellspawn in the past as well, and, it was just business. Apparently that's supposed to make it okay. Also, I do like that Greg in this instance is starting to draw Spawn's cape way more flared out and using it as more of a dynamic type of effect in the panels. I really like that this is the phase of Spawn we're getting into at this point. They then walk down and Spawn notices a really huge Spawn costume hung on the wall and is shocked to see it and says, this was a Spawn like me. And of course, Anahita says, no, he was way bigger than you. Of course, Al is, not really too forgiving about her almost ignorance in the way of dealing with people, and states like, yeah, I understand that part. They then tell him to get some rest, as Spawn at this point takes a moment to pause and kind of almost pay reverence to the fallen Spawn's costume, stating, what happened to you, big guy? Like, were you tricked by Mabalja as well? Was there someone that you loved that he leveraged against you to get you to sign the deal? Like, he almost feels like a kinship with this, ancient Spawn that he never met. And I thought that was a really cool thing to add in here. It's only in really like this one part of the story where we kind of get a glimpse of this interaction, but it is cool that, we're kind of seeing Al start to learn a little bit more about the origin of his powers and the lineage of Spawns that came before him. Meanwhile, in another part of Elysium, we meet back up with Angela as she is led to a meeting with her court-appointed defender, who is Kalindra. We see here Kalindra for the first time. Strangely enough, she seems to be the only angel in Elysium who's dressed in like regular Earth clothes, which is kind of weird. Like, why is she dressed in, professional business attire? Well, I guess if you could call a miniskirt professional business attire, whereas all the other angels are wearing like these elaborate and very scant robes and armor and stuff. Like, Kalindra's just dressed like she's ready for a day at the office. However, Angela is not too impressed by finding out that she has a very young angel appointed as her defender. She even asks, how old are you? And Kalindra replies that she's almost 200 and that this is actually her first case. Angela is not amused and states that she was stupid for thinking that she was going to get a fair trial. However, Kalindra points out that the trial is going to be fair, and she wants Angela's recounting of all the events that's led this to her charges and this trial in the first place, and that she's going to take everything down. Angela explains that she went to Earth and met up with Gabriel, who is the head of Terran Affairs, and presented her with her hunting permit. Gabriel then relented and allowed Angela to go on the hunt for the Hellspawn, but told her to make it quick. She immediately engaged with Spawn, attacking him with the lance, blasting him with the lance, or so she thought. However, she then explains to Kalindra that Spawn was able to dodge this attack by morphing into his cloak. And when Angela got close to investigate, he leapt up from the cloak, grabbed her, and pulled her in. She also states that she had never seen a Spawn do this before. And I'd also like to point out, this isn't really about the story, but this is something that I really like. We can see here that Kalindra, when they first show her, entire body and face, her speech bubble is in kind of a periwinkle type of blue. And from that point on, well, not from that point on, but when it goes into Angela's recounting of past events, Kalindra's speech bubbles are all in blue and Angela's are all in yellow. So we have no trouble keeping track of which one of them is talking at any time. This is fantastic. If you watched my video on Union, or the Union miniseries number 3, this was something I pointed out as a criticism of that book, because the inner monologue of Union was in the same style of yellow text bubble as the exposition narrative that was also in the same yellow text bubble. It was really confusing at times to understand what was Union's inner monologue and what was just basic story exposition. So I very much appreciate the fact that they took the time to delineate with 2 different colors. In fact, if I'm remembering correctly, I even pointed out in that video on Union number 3 that that's something they should have done, was had 2 separate colors so we knew what was exposition and what was Union's inner monologue. And since I brought it up, if you want to learn more about Union or would like to know more about Union, then feel free to check out my Union playlist. We then see Angela telling Kalindra how she was brought into Spawn's cloak and being strangled by him, and that she was somehow able to escape and transmute herself out of the Earth plane. She then states that this was the first time in all of her years that she was unable to kill a Hellspawn and was actually quite mortified by it. Kalindra then asks what happened to the lance, and Angela states that she doesn't really know. She went back looking for it, but the lance was gone along with the Hellspawn. Kalindra then tells her that Gabriel is very adamant about the fact that Angela never checked in with her and never presented a hunting permit, nor did she have any authority whatsoever to go on this expedition. And, that basically Gabriel is just stating that Angela came there and acted of her own accord and lost an interdimensional lance in the process. This, of course, angers Angela as she states that Gabriel is lying and that she, even rubbed her promotion directly in Angela's face. And then Angela states that she should have gone after her instead of the Spawn. At this point, one of the guards interrupts and tells her that her time is up. Angela starts to protest, but the guard does not allow it. And as she's walking off, she asks Kalindra what her chances are, and Kalindra just states, "I haven't lost a case yet," which Angela doesn't find too amusing. We then are teleported to the 8th sphere of Hell, where we see the Metatron for the first time has gone to speak directly with Malbolgia. The Metatron, I assume, at least the way that she's presented here, is the heavenly equivalent of Malbolgia. She is not God, as she states that she does answer to a superior, and so assumedly that superior would be God. Malbolgia states that he recognizes no superior, though he does have one. He just refuses to recognize it due to his own arrogance and, narcissism. This, of course, is to be expected. He is an archdemon. Metatron accuses Malbolgia of breaking the truce between heaven and hell, which he vehemently denies, though he does lie all the time, so she is skeptical. He states that, she can't have any reason for thinking this, as she says that one of his hell creatures has entered Elysium. And I find this interesting, as she somehow knows that Spawn is in Elysium, despite the fact that nobody else in Elysium knows this, and the fact that Malbolgia doesn't know this. And it makes me question, if she already knew this, then why is she not doing anything about it other than going to the 8th sphere of Hell and talking to Malbolgia? If she knew Spawn was there, why wouldn't she just go, take care of it and grab him, unless she can't locate him? I don't know. That part's not really explained all that well. Malbolgia states that if there's any hell creature in heaven, it's of their own accord. He's ordered nothing to violate the truce. And the Metatron then, states, is that true? Are you really being upfront with me? And Malbolgia, of course, is like, yeah, I'm actually telling the truth this time. And then he starts to run down the list. He notices that all the Flebiac or Flebiac or however you say it brothers are back in hell. The Violator is on Earth, but then realizes that he can't locate Simmons and tells Metatron that if Simmons is the one that's in Elysium, that she can go ahead and kill him herself because he's really starting to get irritated with how much trouble Simmons is causing him and that he's about had enough. We then see an image of what I can only presume is the giant spawn that Angela killed, whose costume we saw on the wall of her trophy room, as he moves through the forest and starts to lament the bargain that he made with Malbolgia, wondering, what was it all for, as he was brought back to a bleak world of homunculi and dolls, as he puts it. But interestingly enough, he then seems to realize that there is a way for him to escape and a way out of the contract that he made with Malbolgia and a way that he can be free again. Unfortunately, as he comes to this realization and apparently the idea of how he's going to accomplish this, he hears a noise and is attacked by one of the small creatures and realizes that this one will be his doom. That small creature, of course, being none other than Angela, as we see her drive the lance into his shoulder. And then we realize that this was a dream that Al was having. He wakes up and realizes that he had been asleep, as Kuan Yin tells him that he looked so sweet sleeping there and that they didn't want to disturb him. We also notice that Spawn's costume has become even more spiky and just outrageous as it goes into a more defensive profile, even growing spikes out of the cloak at this point. Spawn then is like, wow, really? I looked cute? And they're like, no, we were just trying to be nice. And then tell him that he's been asleep for a while and that the trial's about to begin. They need to get to the courtroom. However, they also ask if Spawn can perhaps look in a different way than he does now, as to not blow their cover and draw unwanted attention. And he states that there is one thing that he may be able to do, as we see him once again take the form of the blonde-haired white guy that we saw him take in, I believe, issue number 2 was the first issue, or maybe it was number 3 that he did this. I can't remember now. If you want to find out for yourself, please go into my Spawn playlist. It's one of those two. I just can't remember off the top of my head. He, of course, feels like he looks stupid. Again, Al Simmons, of course, being a black man, doesn't really like turning into a blonde-haired white guy. However, Kuan Yin tells him he looks fine and to keep quiet. We then see that Angela pleads not guilty before the judge. The judge states we will see, as she allows prosecution to call their first witness. The prosecutor, of course, calls Gabriel, who, again, we see Gabriel appear in a angelic outfit similar to what all the other angels wear, which once again makes me ask, why is Kalindra not dressed this way? She's, again, dressed like some kind of regular lawyer. However, the prosecutor asks Gabriel to start to retell the event. She states that, Angela never made contact with her and never presented any kind of a hunting permit, and then the prosecutor then asks Gabriel, what is your opinion of Angela? She states that she's a traitor. Of course, Kalindra objects, and this is sustained. Then Gabriel starts to go into this weird, idea that the whole thing was a ruse and that she believes Angela's been working with the Malbolgia for some time and was using this as a way to give the lance to the Hellspawn, as they've been trying to find the lance for the last 6 months, and have not come across any evidence as to where it could be. This is objected by Kalindra once again. However, this time it's overruled, which is surprising given that this is all speculation on Gabriel's part, because she has no evidence to present that would ever substantiate any of these claims. We then see Kuan Yin approach Kalindra and tell her that she has a surprise witness and that she and Anahita are friends of Angela and want to help Kalindra in defending her. The judge asks if Kalindra wants to cross-examine Gabriel. However, she states that that won't be necessary, and that she wants to introduce her own witness. The judge seems reluctant as she states that the defense had no witnesses listed. However, Kalindra states that this witness is paramount to making sure that justice is served and is actually the star witness for the defense. Angela is now wondering what's going on as she is not too happy about being left out of the loop. The judge, however, seems to give throw Kalindra a bone at this point and relents to letting her call a surprise witness. And we see here that Kalindra stands and calls Al Simmons. Al's not really sure what to do, and Anahita tells him to go up there and tell everyone what he knows and tell them that Angela's not a traitor. He says very well, but in doing so, he turns back into his Hellspawn form and states that he was once Al Simmons, but is now better known as Spawn. And I love how, crazy edgelord his costume is at this point. It is just covered in spikes everywhere, and there's just spikes coming out of his head and face and chest and legs, and his fingers are crazy long claws now. I even like how the skulls on his costume, instead of just being the default little flat skulls, are now these big giant angry skulls with fangs. It's just his costume's complete overreaction to being in a place that it does not want to be. However, the judge is not too happy about having a Hellspawn in her courtroom as she yells, "This is an outrage," and wants the guards to immediately destroy Spawn. He tries to protest, however, she'll have none of it, and once again yells, "Destroy it now." Spawn, of course, is then immediately surrounded by all of the guards in the courtroom who are about to kill him, as we see Angela turn and realize that the very Hellspawn she was trying to kill the previous year is now coming to her defense in her trial. She then realizes that she's already lost this trial and probably shouldn't get involved, as good behavior would be the only thing that would show her any kind of leniency now, but then decides, hey, screw it, and jumps forward yelling at Spawn, "Hey Simmons, get out of here," run into the crowd. He tries to talk back to her, but she says move, run, cutting him off immediately, as she and he are now on the lam and trying to get away from all of the guards in the courtroom. As we see Angela and Spawn make their escape through the crowd, the guards who are trying to chase them down don't open fire because the crowd that they are moving through is filled with dignitaries from thousands of different worlds, which brings up the point that apparently Elysium is a place where lots of different creatures from different worlds all over the space-time continuum are congregating, but for some reason the Earth realm seems to operate ambiguously towards Elysium. I mean, or at least there's no, official representation in Elysium of them. I don't know. This is part of where the lore is not super fleshed out, and we're learning things that don't really have any kind of explanation at this point. And maybe I'm thinking too much into this, but it seems to me that there would at least be someone from the Earth realm who would be knowledgeable enough to represent humanity in this scenario, if it's common throughout the rest of the different universes and galaxies. But I don't know. At any rate, they state that, they can't open fire into this crowd, but, the two of them are unarmed. How dangerous can they be? When we see Angela's ribbons reach out, grabbing one of the guns from one of the soldiers, and for the first time, I believe, Spawn's costume launches one of its skulls forward, which bites the fingers off of one of the other guards. Angela even comments that that's a pretty cool trick. Spawn thanks her, but states that his costume has never done that before, and he's not even sure how it did it this time. They are then cornered in the backside of the courtroom as we see, a large number of lances all pointed directly at them. Spawn asks her how they're going to get out of this. She states that the walls aren't that thick and that they should jump through them. Spawn seems a little hesitant, but they don't really have much choice, so out they go as we see a large explosion of glass as they burst through. As they're falling to the ground, Spawn has Angela grab onto him and asks her what the next move is. She states that they have to figure out what's going on, and they also have to do it before they're blown out of the sky or before they hit the ground. Spawn is like, holy crap, what are you talking about? Admittedly, he seems kind of lost in this whole fiasco. She then states that their best bet is for him to basically transmute them into his costume the way that he did when they first fought each other. Spawn, though, isn't really sure how he did that in the first place and isn't sure if he can do it again, but Angela states that he better figure it out quick because they need to get out of here as fast as possible. We then see that Angela and Spawn are being targeted in a crosshair as Angela keeps telling him to go ahead and do it already. Spawn again stating he can't, he's not sure, it isn't working. She finally just says, go into the cloak. And as he starts to protest again, we see that they do seem to suddenly be enshrouded in the cloak before the cloak is blasted straight out of the air, and we see it falling down to the ground, leaving a trail of either smoke or perhaps some kind of thread. I believe it is smoke, though, as it falls to the ground. We then see that the shot was, of course, taken by the same angel who arrested Angela in the first place. And then we find that we get a close-up of Gabriel as she thinks to herself that they're both dead, that this is something she could have never dreamed of, that she didn't just get one, but both of them, as she seems to have some sort of ulterior motive and knowledge that she didn't let on to earlier. We then see Anahita and Kuan Yin embrace as they believe that their friend has just been killed in front of them, and they're, of course, both mourning over the loss of someone that they cared about. We then see this black panel where we see that, the two are still alive and somehow teleported to somewhere else. Spawn then states that he can't see anything. Angela tells him to go ahead and light the place up. He's not sure how, but she states that he can create flame from his hand and that she's seen other of his kind do this before. This, of course, is in reference to what she saw the medieval Spawn do in Spawn issue number 9. Once again, if you haven't watched my video on Spawn number 9, please do so. It will help with a lot of the backstory to what's going on in this story. Spawn ignites his hand and then notices a candle out of the corner of his eye, stating, oh, I can light that. And, Angela is kind of rusing him a little, saying, wow, you're spiky and observant. He states then that he doesn't think that these were here before, referencing the last time he was inside of his cloak. And, Angela seems to be a little bit surprised. She just states that she kind of hopes that wherever they are, that they're hidden from the forces of heaven and hell, as they look around and notice that they're in some sort of a cave. Spawn then tells her to, basically can it with all the jokes and everything, because they need to take this seriously and figure out what their next move is. He then states that it's freezing wherever they are and wonders why Angela isn't cold. She states that her ribbons are keeping her at a pretty consistent body temperature, something that we were made aware of in the first issue. She then states to Spawn that she's been set up and she doesn't like it one bit. Spawn tells her to join the club and then, asks her what exactly she does. She states that she's a bounty hunter and a courier and a damn good soldier in the army of heaven, and that she's going to be a good soldier once again during the next Hell War. Spawn then asks her some more questions like, is she really an angel? Why are all the angels women? She responds with her own question, asking Spawn, do you know why the Mabalja chose you to send back from hell? He says that he didn't, or that he doesn't, but she says that she does, and that she's sorry for getting him wrapped up in all this. Spawn accepts her apology, but then asks if she's going to apologize for trying to kill him last year. She states, of course not, that was just business, that this is politics, and it's a completely different matter. He then asks, what exactly their plan is. He's wondering how they're going to get out of here. He doesn't know how they really got here to begin with. And she asks, can't we go back to the cloak? He says, no, I left the cloak in Elysium. She asks that, then if he can feel it, and he states that he can't, and he thinks that perhaps his cloak is dead. And she states that that's probably the case, and the two of them have now become a little bit closer to each other, as they're really not sure exactly how they're going to get themselves out of this mess. We then see on the final page of the story the candle reaching the last bit of its wick, as Angela brings up a point that, is kind of informative to us, the reader, and Spawn as well, that Spawn's cloak really loved him. And Spawn finds this surprising and, is like, wow, my cloak loved me. And she states that yes, his whole costume loves him, much like her ribbons love her, as we see her ribbon starting to slowly wrap itself around one of his chains. Spawn then says, "Are you sure you're not cold?" And she says, "Well, I am a little chilly." And as we see the candle go out, she states, "That's better." And then she's like, "That's much better," as it's heavily implied that the two of them got real cozy, if you catch my drift. And that is the end of the story of issue 2. We then see image info. Once again, nothing special here. I love how this part's even called blah, 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 kind of implying that nothing that's being written here is all that important, but it's just them getting information out that they want to get out to people. I just thought that was a cool little touch that the image info guys are pretty self-aware. We then get this really cool pinup of Angela, and normally I'd be upset that this is a vertical orientation. However, it is a pinup, so it's not really part of the main story. Though, again, I find this odd that this was not in the center of the book so you could pull this out as a poster. Instead, this is part of the regular book on 2 separate pages. There's no way to remove this without, essentially having to disassemble the whole book and kind of ruin it as a result. I don't know why they wouldn't have made these more of a pull-out mini poster type of thing. But, again, that's choices made by people that were making money off of this stuff, so, maybe they were having better decisions than I am, but it just seems like this should have been a pull-out poster type of thing, and that would have been a cooler idea. But hey, what do I know? We then see a whole lot of image fan art, these, of course, all being drawings sent in of Angela, and sometimes paired up with Spawn. What I find strange about this is that these are all black and white, again, like we saw in the early days of Spawn, and I think the Violator miniseries, they were black and white as well. But at this point, during the main line comics, they were starting to print these in color. So I'm kind of wondering, why in these miniseries they were all still in black and white like this. Some of these were actually really cool. I like this one here and this one in particular. These are really unique. And I don't know, it seems odd that they're all still in black and white. But maybe that's the way they were sent in. Maybe that's the way they requested they be sent in, or these might be holdovers from when Spawn number 9 first printed and people were sending in Angela artwork based off of that. Here we once again see the exact same 2 ads that we saw in the first issue of the Angela action figure and the Angel's Visitations. Nothing more to talk about here. If you watched my first video on this, you know exactly all I had to say about these 2 things. We then once again see the exact same 2-page rundown of the first run of Todd Toys, which as we know today is now called McFarlane Toys, being produced, and just kind of the factory that it's moving through, all the stuff being painted and boxed up for shipping across the ocean. Again, nothing new here to talk about. On the final page of the book, we see an advertisement for Shadowhawk Vampirella crossover Creatures of the Night. I unfortunately don't own this, but I would really like to own this. Honestly, I don't know a whole lot about Vampirella. I never got super into her, or have read a whole lot of her comics, just kind of skimmed through some here and there. She was never a character I was super interested in, but, that's not that I have anything against the character or any of the stories about her. I just haven't really had a chance to get too far into it. I do, of course, really like Shadowhawk, and I think that this is a super cool design for his armor. I like the extra stylization of all the spikes coming off of his, gauntlets and bracers here and coming out of his knees. This is a really cool look for him, and if I ever have a chance to buy this, I definitely will. And on the reverse inside cover, we see an advertisement for Spawn number 28, which is advertised as being low on action and high on emotion as Spawn has to confront Wanda face to face. and, apparently finally come to grips with the reality of, his former wife now being married to his best friend. Of course, at this point, I haven't reached issue number 28 in my videos, but I will get there eventually, and when I do, we'll talk about all of these things that happened in that issue. And that was issue number 2 of the original Angela miniseries. Overall, I thought it was a really good continuation of the story. I like the fact that we got to see more of Elysium and the whole idea of Spawn's costume being able to change itself and activate a different mode for a situation that it perceived as more dangerous. I also like the idea of, Spawn's costume also gaining some new abilities as we saw the skulls launching out and attacking stuff for him. And, the mystery of him being able to teleport into his cloak, but then it being different than the last time, and now his cloak apparently being dead, and him not knowing exactly how he and Angela are going to get out of there. I like that part is mysterious. The only parts that I don't really like about this story is, like I said, just kind of where there's like weird plot holes in the lore of Spawn where things aren't really explained about, how does the Metatron play into all this? And, if Elysium's not heaven, where is heaven? And does Elysium exist within heaven, or is it outside of that realm? There's a lot of questions about like the deeper lore that don't get explained here that I wish they did. Again, you only have so many pages to work with in a comic book, and that's not really the story they were trying to tell with this. But it was something that I would have liked to have seen explored more. However, these are just my opinions. Your opinions may vary, and maybe you're not worried about any of that stuff, and I'm just being a super big nerd by trying to figure it out myself. But that's okay, because we're all entitled to our own opinions. If you enjoyed today's video, please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. And thanks for stopping by. Have a great day.